It's Impact with the Florida Star, the largest, oldest, and most read African-American newspaper in Northeast Florida and South Georgia. And now, here's the host, the publisher of the award-winning Florida Star, Clara McLaughlin.
This is OVO. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Impact. Got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to be talking to Greg Newburn. Greg Newburn is the Florida Director of Families Against Mandatory Minimums. How you doing, sir?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. I saw that you guys are doing some great work here. And I know in Florida, hot weather. And I can imagine if a prison system or prisons do not have the AC, then we're going to have some problems. Talk about what's going on and the effort that you guys are dealing with.
Yeah, so we at FAMM represent families of incarcerated persons, and we try to represent the interest of incarcerated persons. And one thing we've heard every year in the summer is just how miserable the conditions are inside Florida prisons, in part because we're one of just a handful of states that still has no air conditioning in nearly all of its state-run prison facilities. And as you can imagine, here in Florida, as the number of days that we get up to 90 degrees and above goes up every year, it's pretty brutal inside there with no air circulation in a lot of these places, certainly no central air conditioning or anything. It can get up to 100, 110, 115 degrees at times in these places, and the people inside there are just miserable all the time. You know, they can't sleep. They're just drenched in sweat. They don't want to move because it's so hot. They've got to soak themselves in cold water before they go to bed and so on. And it really is just inhumane conditions that we're talking about here. And in 2019, our position is just we should be better than this. And prison itself is a punishment. And we should be better than these inhumane conditions, and we should provide some of this bare minimum of comfort and for these folks who we're charged with taking care of while they're incarcerated. FAMM was started back in 1991 when our founder, and she's no longer the president, but she was the president for a long time, and she's the chair of our board now. Her name's Julie Stewart. Her brother was
What's up, Julie? I remember Julie.
Yeah, she's great. Her brother was arrested on federal marijuana charges, and she was working in Washington at the time, and her brother, good family, good background, educated, no criminal history, and was found growing marijuana in his house up in Washington State. And she thought, well, that's a really stupid thing that you did, but you didn't hurt anybody or anything, so you're probably not facing too much time. And it turns out that based on the amount that they were growing, he was facing a 5-year mandatory federal prison charge. And she was appalled by the idea that this guy, who had never hurt anybody, would still have to go to prison for 5 years because of this mandatory sentence, and that there was nothing a judge could do to reduce that sentence. And so she left her job and started FAMM because she found so many people around the country who were facing similar circumstances, and built the organization up over time to represent thousands of people around the country who have experienced these bad sentencing laws, have gone through the system. And what we try to do is reform those laws at the federal level and in states around the country who have similar laws. And as I said, I work here in Florida, and we've been here for several years now trying to reform some of our laws, which are among the worst in the country. But through the years, what we've also found is that the problems are not just with the sentencing laws, it's also with prison conditions. It's also just with the living day-to-day conditions of people who are incarcerated inside. And so one of the things that we've done is try to move from just advocating for changes to mandatory minimum laws to things that affect everybody in the criminal justice system, from sentencing laws all the way to reentry and prison conditions and those sorts of things. So the things that are important to families of incarcerated people are the things that are important to us. And so we work on those issues at the federal level and at the state level. And to that end, we partner with other organizations. We partner with a group here in Florida called Florida Cares, which has done great work organizing and mobilizing families of incarcerated people to try to change policies in Tallahassee and to try to hold bureaucracies accountable and to try to make the time they have inside the system the best it can be. So when folks are free, they can come out better than they were before, re-enter society, and stay out of the system going forward.
Are we talking private prisons? Are we talking public prisons? Or are we talking both?
So here in Florida, the state-run prison facilities have no air conditioning, or most of them don't. But the private facilities do. So private prisons in Florida are all air conditioned, and they're proud of that fact. They talk about that fact. They say that's one of the things that distinguishes them from the state-run facilities, and that's the truth. You know, they do have air conditioning in those prisons, and one of the things we hear from families, and it's sort of torn on this question, because a lot of families, they don't like the idea of private prisons in principle. They don't like the idea that someone could be profiting off of incarceration and so on. At the same time, they recognize that the day-to-day living conditions in private facilities are almost uniformly better than they are in state-run facilities. So while they are opposed in principle to the idea of private prisons, they often want their loved ones to be housed in them because it's just better day-to-day. If the misery of the state-run facilities is often not the case in private facilities. So a lot of them are torn on that question.
Yeah, well, because the government that possibly could be putting that same money into the state system, they pay a lot of money to the private prisons that they can use to better the state prison system.
Yeah, and I would argue that the more fundamental problem there is we misallocate resources on the sentencing side. We just have too many people in our prisons that don't need to be there, and we could reinvest the money if we were to reduce our incarceration rate, if we were to reduce our prison population, if we were to divert some of these low-risk offenders away from state prisons and jails and into more effective and cheaper alternatives, we would free up all the money that we need to put air conditioning in prisons, to restore drug treatment programs in prisons, to restore rehabilitative programming, to introduce new educational opportunities and reentry programming that we've had to cut in recent years just to keep the lights on in Florida Department of Corrections. So we have been derelict in our duties over the past few years. We've allowed the prison population to balloon, to rise, and we haven't funded it at a level commensurate with the number of people in the Florida Department of Corrections care. And because of that, we start seeing things like increased violence, prisoner violence, corrections officers' abuse, like we just saw on video a couple of weeks ago. We see a rise in those sorts of things because we are not keeping up with the budget that's commensurate with the prison population. So we've got to right-size the prison population. We've got to change our sentencing laws. We've got to put the right people there and take the other people out. And then we can do the things that actually make sure that we run an effective system that takes care of people from the beginning of their sentences all the way to the end.
I think you're right. When someone is in prison and all that prison life offers, when they come out, we still have to deal with them in the community, and they can possibly hurt people if we're not doing what we're supposed to do on the other side of that wall. Now, there's a case of Cyntoia Brown. You probably heard she just got out after 15 years, and amazing. She's 30. She killed a man that was a John, basically, going after a underage girl who basically was being pimped by a guy. And now she's out, and now she has to re-enter society. I think she may have had to deal with mandatory minimums because when a lot of the prosecutors, they'll put a gun charge on there, they'll put, if they found some drugs, they'll put that on there, and they'll just kind of figure out what's the best way to be able to put all these different charges on there. And ultimately, she ended up with 60 years, but got out because of the outcry, because when people look at her entire case, her mother's situation, the guy who abused her, as well as the man who she said that she thought was possibly going to kill her in that home. Tell us a little bit of how you feel about the criminal justice system as it relates to Cyntoia Brown's case.
Yeah, well, her case is actually emblematic of a lot of the problems of the criminal justice system, just sort of writ large, which is that a lot of times we sentence people for the name of the crime that they committed instead of the circumstances around that crime. So we sentence people to first-degree murder, but we don't ask what that murder was. We don't say, is this somebody who was attempting to, traffic somebody into a sex ring, or is it somebody who is a battered spouse who is trying to escape from that situation? Or here in Florida, we have first-degree murder for drug delivery that leads to overdose, right? I mean, there's a woman who goes on trial in September for first-degree murder, and her crime was giving her friend heroin. That was it. No sale, nothing. She gave her friend heroin in a jail. Her friend died. And in September, she goes on trial for first-degree murder. And the only sentences available for that crime are life without parole or the death penalty. And so we sentence people to things like first-degree murder, and we think of serial killers, Ted Bundy, premeditated murder, and often that's just not the case. And so what we've said at FAMM for a long time is that obviously punishment is warranted in certain circumstances and when crimes are committed, but judges should be able to take into consideration all of the relevant circumstances of that crime and the relevant circumstances of the offender and tailor a sentence that's appropriate for that person. And then what we say is, and even if the sentence is tailored to that person at the time, there should be some sort of mechanism down the line, whether that's parole or whether that's second-look sentencing of the kind that Senator Booker just filed a bill for, something down the line that says, what have you done in your time incarcerated that has improved yourself? Are you a different person now than you were 10 years ago, 15 years ago? Can you be trusted to go back into society peacefully in a way that we might not have been comfortable with back then, to make sure that we're not sending people away and just leaving them there to rot for the rest of their lives when it's just unnecessarily cruel and they could do something with their lives on the outside.
Absolutely. This is OPO. I'm speaking to Greg Newburn. He is the Florida Director of Families Against Mandatory Minimums. Now, sleep is really important. I know growing up in Jacksonville and having had some hot, sleepless nights. When you can't sleep, you're trying to fan yourself sometimes. If you don't have the fan, you're getting up, going to the window. Sometimes you're going outside. You're just trying to figure out what to do. But then the sunlight comes out. And we all know when people don't get enough sleep, there's stress that comes along with that. Sleep apnea causes a lot of different emotional problems. That it can cause physical problems. Also, in a prison situation, who knows what problems it can solve? Or it can create.
Yeah. So one of the things that we know is that extreme heat and excessive heat and exposure to extreme heat causes people to be more irritable. It causes people to sleep more poorly, and that causes people to be more irritable. It exacerbates mental health problems, and we know that a lot of folks in prison suffer from mental health problems that go untreated when they're incarcerated. So this exposure to extreme heat is, by the way, it's itself dangerous, right? I mean, the extreme heat has killed more people than hurricanes over the last 30 years nationally. It's the number one weather-related killer in the United States. And then it also creates these dangerous conditions inside prisons that leave prisoners and corrections officers at greater risk of violence. It just creates these conditions that are just unnecessarily violent and inhumane. And we can fix this just by putting air conditions in the prisons and making it a little cooler. I like to say, if you went to school every day and your classroom was 115 degrees, how much would you learn? Right. How much would you want to learn? What would you want to do? Would you want to be productive and use your time wisely, or would you just want to sit there and try to cool off? That's the experience of tens of thousands of prisoners every single day in the summer here in Florida. And, most Floridians, I grew up here, we've all gone through our fair share of hurricanes. We lose power for a couple of days, a hurricane comes through. It's miserable. Yeah. Everyone knows what it's like to lose power, lose air conditioning in Florida for just a couple of days. These guys have to sit there for months in exactly that situation, the situation that we all know, sitting in a house without air conditioning when it's 90 degrees outside, the heat index is over 100. It's miserable. And and someone pointed out not too long ago that you can go to any animal shelter in the state and they've got fans at least to cool these animals off. We don't even have that in most of the prisons. We treat our prisoners worse than animals in a lot of ways because of this excessive heat. And it's long past time to fix this. I mean, there's just no excuse for keeping people in these conditions.
You're right. I remember the last time James Brown got arrested, it was after a hurricane or some big old thing that was happening a weather event that was happening in Georgia, and there's some kind of domestic violence situation, and it was blamed on the heat. All right,
Right.
Greg Newburn, man, I really appreciate you. The Florida Director of Families Against Mandatory Minimums, FAMM, a great organization, I've had experience with working with them over the years when I was a lobbyist in D.C. Thank you, sir. People want to find out more. People want to get involved. People want to speak out. What can they do?
Well, I'd encourage everyone to go to our website. It's www.famm.org. That's FAMM.org. And we're trying to build an army of advocates. Anybody who has somebody inside, please join up. We need all the volunteers we can, and need some people to tell their stories and really put some pressure on folks to get some things done. So thank you for your kind words, by the way, and we appreciate it. And thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate you.
Do you know which media solely addresses issues of concern for African Americans? The Florida Star. Do you know which media carries local, state, national, and international news regarding African Americans? The Florida Star. Do you know the only media that carries a special section for our youth at home and the schedule for 3 black television networks? Now you know the Florida Star. Northeast Florida's largest, oldest, and most read African American newspaper, serving since 1951 in more than 200 locations. The Florida Star. News you can use. News you can trust. The people's choice. Striving to make a difference. Subscribe today. Call 766-8834. That's 766-8834. Pick up the Florida Star at over 200 locations. Or to have it delivered, call 766-8834. The Florida Star. Speaking truth to power.
This is OPO. I am speaking to Dominic Davis from Jacksonville. He is the CEO of 92.7 The Beat Jamz, and someone that we should pay attention to because it's so important for us to own, as well as the economics. We always talk about economics and how economics can do wonders for communities. And this is a brother that's out here doing it. Local brother. How you doing, Dominic?
Fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. Tell us a little bit about your history in Jacksonville.
I graduated from Reebok. I had a little rocky time, got in a little trouble, and I ended up, I had an uncle by the name of Jeff Lee that worked in radio. So he pretty much took me up on his wing to keep me out of trouble. So I ended up going to a radio station, which was 92.7 The Beat Jamz at that particular time. And I ended up interning. I was trying to get a job there, but they wouldn't give me a job. So I pretty much kind of stayed up there and learned the ropes and did promotions and went out at Ferndina and did all the remote stuff. And later on, my uncle ended up talking to the director, and I ended up started working in promotions at 92.7 The Beat.
How did you end up owning it?
Well, I ended up owning 92.7 The Beat when back then they ended up, the signal was weak. And by them, and also they ended up getting bought out by, I think at that particular time, it was Clear Channel, if I'm not mistaken. But the signal was weak, so they ended up abandoning that name and turning it into 93.3 The Beat. So I ended up, all the good stuff that was going on with 92.7 The Beat Jamz back in the day, the new radio station 93.3 stopped doing. It began to be a money problem, and I saw that, it wasn't catering to the black community anymore as when it was 92.7 The Beat out on the street doing live remote. So what I did was I took the opportunity to go ahead and do my research and end up taking over the station. And I'm going to bring the old stuff back of getting out here, meeting the people, doing live remotes that everyone loved then, and they're going to love it when I start back doing it.
So talk a little bit about using radio to be able to deliver a positive messages out there, good music that can ultimately heal or make the community feel good. Is that your feeling that you're using radio in a way that changes or reaches or touches the community?
Yes. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to balance it out. You know, I understand that, you know, you have your rap artists, but, you know, you have elderly people also. They need something to listen to. They want to hear all the old stuff. They don't want to hear a lot of derogatory stuff. So they have kids, and, you know, they be riding in the car with their kids. So my thing is I try to bring new and exclusive music to the listeners that they never heard and that they can relate to and that their kids or little kids can sit and also listen to without the curse words and all of that. You know, so that itself is a big plus with the artists. I also try to have with the community to inform the community of there's a lot of radio stations now. They just bypass a lot of information because it's a money game with the mainstream radio station. They're not gonna, if it's not about money and you're spending big money, you're not gonna know anything about certain events. And I think that's sad that you will not inform your community of what's going on in the city. That's bad.
Now, we're on a radio station that's owned by a sister. You are a brother that owns now, 2 or 3 radio stations? We were talking about one, but you now own one as of yesterday in Atlanta.
Yes.
We have the Florida Star, we have the Free Press, so we have some black media. How do we work together to make each other money?
Well, with me, I'm gonna team up with the black business like Florida Star, and when I work with them, I have absolutely no problem if they call me and need something from the station. They need to put a message out, need to do an interview. I have no problem because it's informing the community. This stuff is absolutely necessary because by the time you get a lot of information, the news is not going to give it to you. The news is only going to give you what they want you to hear. And what you may hear may not be correct. So I rather hear it from the community that I live in and be in. A lot of people will. So we can work together and put all the information together. It's just like up under one house. So
Right.
that way the information won't be mixed up. You'll get the correct information.
I'm speaking to Dominic Davis. He's the CEO of 92.7 The Beat Jamz. He also owns radio station in Atlanta. People want to find out more about you, want to hook up with you, maybe even want to get a job from you. What do they need to do?
They can actually give me a call at 904-265-4664, or they can email me at 92.7thebeatjams@gmail.com, or they can actually go to the website at www.jacksonville927thebeatjams.com.
All right, Mr. Dominic Davis, congratulations to you, and thank you, sir.
I appreciate it.
This is Opio, and boy, those of you who have loved ones that been in hospices, you know the importance of them. Right now we have Haven Hospice on. Sandra Francis, she is the volunteer coordinator for 3 counties, including Duval. How you doing, Sandra?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's not raining, thank the Lord.
Right. So tell us a little bit about what is a hospice for the young people who don't know. What is a hospice?
Hospice is for end-of-life care. It's not curative, it's palliative care. So it means that whatever time you've got left, and we never know what that is, we're going to make it as comfortable and as pain-free as possible. And hospice is not a place, it's a philosophy. So wherever you live, whether it be in a home, a nursing home, under the bridge, we're going to be there to help you.
Have you seen any changes in hospices over the last 10 to 20 years, and what kind of changes have you seen?
Oh, there's been no end of changes. To begin with, we weren't really accepted by the medical people really too much, because it was all about curing. And so we've been in business now for 40 years, and over that time, it's very much more accepted now. Obviously, the word hospice brings a lot of fear into people's lives, and they feel like, oh my gosh, that's like the last place I want to go. And yes, it is. And we can make that transition for you so much more comfortable, not only for the patient, but for the families as well. So I think just getting the word out there that what hospice can do. I think the most that we hear from people afterwards is, gosh, I wish we'd known about you sooner. We would have got you sooner, or we would have, really benefited from your services. So, yeah, there's been some changes, as there is with all healthcare, but we're in for the long haul.
Now, it's very interesting. Have you seen anybody go into a hospice and then, you know what, I'm going to come out because they're really don't need it after a while? Did you seen any? Yeah. Have you ever seen that type of healing?
Oh, all the time. What happens is we meet once a week. All of the disciplines come in together: the nurse, the CNA, the chaplain, the social worker, and we talk about each patient. And every week we are able to discharge a patient, not just one but many, because they are no longer hospice appropriate.
Wow.
Doesn't mean they're cured, but it means that they've leveled out. They've got such great care that they're now no longer hospice appropriate, which is a great day when you graduate from hospice. Wow. That's not what people think. You're going to go out like that. So yeah, we certainly do that a lot. And the thing that we do is we put them into a program called Transitions, because whilst they were on our services, they had so much help, so many people coming to visit, and then we say, oh, you don't need us anymore, and that's like a double-edged sword. So we move them into Transitions. They get a call from a volunteer: how are you doing? From a social worker: can we connect you to any resources within the community, like Meals on Wheels and elder care, that kind of thing. So we try to take care of our patients, whether they're on our services or whether they've been discharged.
I know you're busy. I wanted to ask you about animals and how they are a part of that, or any other type of comforting things that you guys do while the patient is there.
Did you say animals?
Right, animals.
Yeah, we have pet visitors. Somebody may have a pet, a dog or a cat, that is very conducive to visiting people. And that's great, because a lot of our patients have moved into nursing homes, and they no longer can take their pet with them, or the pet has died and they aren't able to renew that pet. And so for someone to come and visit with a dog or cat or a horse, we have had a horse before, is just an amazing thing for them. It's a great bridge for them to feel something that they can love on and hold on and hug for a little bit longer. So we have lots of different programs that would appeal to many people for volunteer opportunities and programs to use their skills.
Great. This is Opie. I'm speaking to Sandra Francis. She is the volunteer coordinator of Haven Hospice. People wanted to find out more about you guys. People wanted to get involved. People wanted to use you guys. How can they contact you?
Oh, well, I am just waiting by the phone right here. I would love to hear from you. My telephone number is 904-213-2510.
All right. You guys have a website or something like that or an email address?
You can email me at sjfrancis, Francis with an I, 2, the number 2, at beyourhaven.org, or you can go onto our website, which is www.beyourhaven.org, and look up volunteer opportunities. There's also an application there online. So love to hear from you, and thank you so much for including us tonight.
All right, Sandra, thank you. Got to get out of here. This is Opio. I will see you next time on Impact.